To how to be a humane leader without losing your job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm the host, Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader, alongside Chris Ollerton, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we will discuss how to foster ideas from your team and have active listening as a human leader. Hi, sir. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing good, Roberto. I am enjoying our podcast. I was thinking about being a humane leader and how we work with our teams and everything, and I realized we've become quite the team and being humane leaders to each other. So it is good to see you again.
Indeed, sir, it did, and it has been a pleasure for me to learn from you and with you from all this time.
And some of the topic today, in terms of encouraging ideas, we do this with each other off camera quite a bit, where we throw ideas out there, some of them good, some of them not so good, right? Where we admit, that topic's lower priority. I don't like that topic. And, when you're a humane leader, sometimes early in your career, you got there because you were the one fostering great ideas and they were successful ideas. And therefore, in your new leadership role, you want to keep doing that because that's what got you there in the first place. And really, as a humane leader, it's probably going to be a shift in your mindset where you have to basically be quiet initially, right? You need to use some of your active listening skills that you've talked about many times to encourage the team to throw ideas out there. This is a brainstorming event. And if you're in there being overly active, right? A leader's always active, but if you're overly active, the team's going to be quiet and just sit and listen to you. And that's not a good way to foster ideas, right?
No, it isn't. And also, there are certain people who likes their voice to be heard more than anyone. So they will take the microphone much more, than other people, and they will begin throwing ideas, even though it might not the good ones or the proper ones. So listening to what your team has to say is something really good. Let me tell you, what I do usually in startups, regardless of the phase they are in, they could be pre-seed or seed or Series A, whatever, is to implement a horizontal organization. That means that everybody has a voice within the team. And what I do when I interview candidates, I mention this because it's really important from the beginning. And I say, your voice, it is present in this team. If there is something you want to tell me, go ahead. I will listen. And there could be three outcomes. Or I could say, hey, it's an amazing idea. Let's implement it. The second one, it could be, it lacks something. So they could go and work harder and with hard data in their arguments. And I will listen again. Or the third one, I could say to them, okay, it will be a no because of, I don't know, we have implemented this and it didn't work, or this goes against our business model. So in the end, people are allowed, not allowed, are having a strong communication with me and the team to bring any new ideas, because in the end, that is, and what I have found is that some juniors, in this case engineers, have this as a credo with senior engineers. So because they could listen, because this isn't only about me, it is about the team. So people got a higher communication with a lot of value with this.
Without a doubt. And I think, when I think about some of the differences perhaps between the startup and the huge corporation, I'd say startups, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a lot more leeway, a lot more options for creativity. You could go in many different directions. Lots of times in a corporation, there may be a lot of constraints that the team is not always aware of because they're not in leadership, right? Budget constraints, personnel restraints. Maybe your company, like we had a lot of standards that you had to follow. And so certain products or certain ways of doing things wouldn't be allowed because it violated a policy, a security policy, a procedural policy, maybe some control policies for financials, many different things that in a huge corporation may restrict your creativity, let's say. So we're trying to foster ideas, and the humane leader needs to be quiet to let the team brainstorm and not shut anybody down. But sometimes what we would have to do is outline the constraints early on. So, hey, team, we're getting together. We need to solve this problem. But here's the things I need you to be aware of before we get started. Like, hey, we only have a budget of some number of dollars, whether that's a small project, $50,000, a good sized project, $200,000-$300,000. Maybe it's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. So by having the team together, whether it's virtual or physically in the same room, and I encourage for brainstorming to be physically together. It does tend to work better. It can work over virtual, but be together. But as a humane leader, if you can explain some of those constraints up front, then someone who's being creative doesn't feel shut down when you say, look, Roberto, that's way too expensive. Or, hey, Roberto, that's going to take 20 people. We can only get approval for 3. You don't want, if you tell that person that during this brainstorming, then they get shut down and they aren't going to be as open to suggest other ideas. So instead, if there are some very, restrictive constraints, right? That's what constraint is. It's saying it can only fit inside this, then tell them what they are up front. Tell it in a very objective way so you're not singling anybody out. But if I single Roberto out, Roberto, that's way too expensive. We can only spend $500,000 and it takes way too many people. And that's ridiculous because we can only get 2 people to work on this, not a dozen. Well, now Roberto is going to feel all shut down and like, oh, well, I don't have any ideas. Well, that's not good, right? And so I would always like to try and, get whiteboards up in the room, outline what some of our constraints are that we know at the moment. There may be new constraints that come up later, but outline that stuff so that everybody in their brainstorming is kind of on an equal playing field, whether they're super experienced and they've done this before and they know there's going to be budget levels and certain things that won't get approved no matter what, no matter how brilliant the idea is. But outline that, and that puts everybody on an equal playing field for making suggestions. And as the humane leader, don't reject anything too early. Document it. So if anybody gives an idea, document it equally. Like give it a title. So if Roberto makes an idea, and John makes an idea, and Susie makes an idea, and Linda makes an idea, and Barb makes an idea, write them down so that they all feel equal, that their idea got captured, at least by name. And then as you're brainstorming around, some of them might get eliminated through the process, but it will encourage a level of equality across the either engineers or marketing people or salespeople, even though they're senior and middle and juniors, et cetera. You have to have some initial equality to get a lot of ideas out on the table, and you start through your humane leadership aspect of filtering them. Eventually you got to filter, right? But early on in this, it's about getting the team to speak up. And I, as a type A kind of leader, even in our own podcast, I do try to keep in mind, am I talking more than Roberto? I need to let Roberto make sure he gives his opinions, right? So as a humane leader, you need to be aware of your own characteristics. And in certain situations, you need to be the top talker. You know, it's that kind of a meeting. You've got a set agenda. You've got to get through material that the team just needs to be aware of. It's not up for debate. Then yeah, the leader should be the one talking the most.
Yeah,
If it's this creative kind of thing, the rules are reversed. And I would argue that the humane leader talks last, talks least, but sets the rules, the boundary or the constraints.
yeah, yeah. Let me tell you, the assumption that you made of a startup, it is. Here we could implement new ideas as much as we can or as much as we need because we have, depending on the stage, we have one objective. In the startup that I'm in, it is growth user. So it is something that we run. And let me tell you this. One of my junior engineers came along with an idea 1 month ago. We were having problems with our deployments. Big projects took 3 days, 2 engineers, all the time to implement them. So he got this new idea, which was Git flow. I will go deep in this. And I said, okay, you will do that project. He took 1 sprint, and the results is the following. From those big projects that we took up to 3 days, now we lower it down to half an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something really bad. And it was something that we lack the control and we got too much mayhem. And with this Git flow, we had this awesome. So what I did was at the C-level meetings, I said, and as the results, I said, Alex brought this idea. I put on him to work. And what he did was this, and this is the results. So besides listening to others, what I did was to give credit to him because it was his idea. I never thought about this, but he found it in an article and he got the credit that he deserved. So I think it is something also as a humiliator to give credit to the one who did it, not to take it because, to say I'm the guy who did it and Timmy. No. I always do that. So in this case, this guy has raised his, I wouldn't say his ego, but the willingness to do more and to provide ideas, and the engineers around has said, okay, if he did that, I should say this and I should do. So I'm always open to new ideas.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about credit where credit is due, right? Acknowledging, especially having your leadership know those people's names, that this was the person who's doing really well. That's really, in a big corporation, it's really critical because when it comes time to pay raises and promotions, if the leadership team's never heard of somebody and you're trying to get them promoted, it's much more difficult than if you've not given them credit by name before, they've never heard of this person who's making you, the humane leader, successful, right? Because we get judged on the overall project's success and in your case, growth of usership and so on. But if they've never heard of any of these people, it's going to be hard for you to get them more money, and then you'll end up losing them, right? They'll quit. They feel discouraged. They quit and go to some other company and be creative. So in this idea generation phase, you can even give recognition even within the team, right? You're in the room, you're brainstorming, you're getting ideas up there. Roberto, that's brilliant. I'm not sure if it'll work, but I think that's a fantastic idea. And acknowledging that to the whole team can really make a big difference in their effort to make the idea successful. Again, in the big corporation, though, to me, I think there were a lot of brilliant ideas that probably would work great in a smaller company, but would never work in our company because we had, so many legal constraints. We had security constraints because of our work for the government. We had, budget constraints because we were so focused on stock price that to take that kind of a financial risk was just never going to get approved. You needed a much higher probability of success. So what would happen is some small company would do something really unique, creative, and then we'd buy them. So we let the other companies gamble. And then once they're finally successful, so 1 out of 100 ideas was really successful, then we would buy that one successful idea. So it's just, again, different companies, different sizes will have different styles, but the humane leadership aspect is the same. It is outline what the problem is, outline if you do have some constraints, even as a startup, outline what those are, and then be the encouraging voice. If you've got to speak, be the encouraging voice. Great idea, Roberto. Susan, how do you think we could expand on that? Pull people in to the activity. That was one of the things that I also found. Some people just are naturally kind of quiet. They are concerned that they won't seem smart in front of the other people. Sometimes the humane leader needs to change their personality a little bit by calling on them. Like they don't want to stick out, they don't want to be noticed, but look, as part of this brainstorming idea, I don't know who's going to have the best idea, and I don't know who might see a flaw in somebody else's idea. So sometimes you've got to kind of draw people out against their own personalities and draw them into the conversation. With Roberto, what do you think about Steve's idea? Do you think Marcia's idea is going to work? What do you think about it? And draw them into that versus offering my own opinion. Roberto, I think that idea is crazy. It'll never work. Now Roberto's shut down because I'm the leader. Let's get the team to give some feedback. I might agree with what the team is saying, whether it's successful or bad, but it needs to come from the team first. And then at the end of the whole meeting, and that might be a series of meetings, depending on how big the project is, yeah, I may have to weigh in with my expertise to judge which direction we're going to go, because that's a leader's job. But, the humane leader does more steering as the captain, kind of steering where we're going without solving the problem, right? I guess.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. You might not know, but I'm introverted. I'm an introvert guy. Have always been, and I always will be. So I'm the guy who usually doesn't speak as much as an extrovert, which brings a lot of ideas and says a lot of words. I usually keep calm, quiet. I only talk when I have to talk, and I could provide something. It's so all the humane leaders had to recognize which member of their teams are extroverted and the ones who are introverted, because you only let the guys which are extroverted talk, there won't be any ideas or anything from the introverted guys. So allow them to talk. Is excuse me, something different to pointing out and say, hey, Roberto, give me a talk. What are your opinions? Because maybe I will feel maybe compelled to provide not the best answer, or I will feel pressure. Foster them to speak, to do it without not fear, but not having a pressure to do it is something really, really important. If a humane leader identifies which members of their teams are introverted and you let them speak when they feel to, is going to bring awesome content and awesome ideas of this.
Undoubtedly, completely agree. Yeah, it takes a lot of different personalities to make a successful team, right?
Yeah, and I was wondering, you mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago, that you were a leader type 1 or A. What do you mean by that?
Oh, type A personality in English or in American lexicon means you're really driven, you're outgoing, you're pushing for success. Type A's are the ones driving, they're getting to work early, they work late, they want to get promoted, they talk loud, they are trying to be in every meeting, giving creative ideas, they want to be heard, they're extroverts. They are extroverts on steroids. And so for many of the things in my leadership role, I was like that. Now, we were recently at a dinner party, big party. I mean, they had live music, and this guy was hosting this big party. And I am, for work, was an extrovert. However, personally, I'm actually a bit of an introvert. In other words, I'm a bit awkward meeting new people I don't know. I'm terrible with names, so I really have to struggle to learn names. I actually found myself as the party was slowly winding down, and as I went and sit off by myself to just observe everybody else in the party. Mm-hmm. And so personally, I'm actually an introvert. Professionally, I'm an extrovert, a professional extrovert. But it's a learned behavior. And that's something else I think as a humane leader is realize that your team members have a work personality, they have a personal personality. They may have a different personality with you when you're with them one-to-one versus when they're with the rest of the team. Maybe they have a different personality when they're with some other members of your team. In other words, maybe they don't get along well with David, but they get along great with Linda. And so be aware of some of that when you're brainstorming and trying to bring out this creativity, that Roberto may be a little reluctant to give ideas because Steve is always so nasty to him for some reason. So, the humane leader needs to be a bit of a referee too, in terms of, all right, yes, I'm not going to play in the game. I'm a referee. I'm going to try and make it as fair as I can. I need to bring out the best of all the players. And that analogy, I think, applies to a lot of things in humane leadership. When I was younger, I always thought of, because of how the company I came from had a very family type orientation, members of the family. And it was because people stayed there their entire careers, and you went to each other's weddings, and you went to their kids' weddings. But I realized as we got acquired and I worked in an even larger company, it's not, you don't think about it as family. You need to think about humane leadership and your role in the company as a team, because sometimes you got to trade out players. Sometimes the players aren't playing as well as they could for whatever reason, injury, so to speak, mental injury. And so in this brainstorming and being humane, think of it as more like you're a referee. You're not on either team. Yes, you have to set some constraints or some rules around the idea generation, but you're more of a referee in these early stages and trying to make sure that everybody plays fair, everybody knows the same rules, and everybody gets an opportunity to make suggestions, and we then look at those ideas equally, regardless of who the player is, whether they're the star quarterback, the star kicker, the star forward on the, I'm trying to think of football, soccer analogies. I don't know those positions very well, right? But you got strikers and forwards and goalies. In the idea generation, your role is the referee to try and get all those players to play equally, even though sometimes personality-wise they may oppose each other. Try and get them to play equally so that you get equal contribution. Eventually, the best idea's got to win, regardless of who it comes from. And eventually, the referee turns into a judge and has to judge the ideas and decide which ones we're going to go forward with, because that's a leader's role. But in the early part of that humane part, think of yourself more as the referee, trying to encourage all players to participate with their strengths. And if they do have a weakness, like being an introvert, you're going to have to try and draw them out of being an introvert and get them to participate. Just like for the type A or the extrovert, you got to kind of shut them up.
Yeah, but actually, with introverted, it isn't a weakness. Introverted is a strength. The thing is, we don't have to take the microphone and talk like a rock star or we have something to say, but it is something that we don't get overwhelmed by how the people get all these microphone and talk. Let me give you an example. At a board meeting, I think it was 2 board meetings ago, everybody was talking about something. Everybody was talking about something. And I let them talk. And I had something to speak. When there was a silence, I mentioned the idea. And everybody saw me and said, yeah, man, you are right. I won't say it because it's Bulgara. But yes, you are right. And then I spoke more because I had this audience, let me tell you, and everybody was listening to me. So being introverted, it is not a weakness. It is to understand that people will tell you something when the moment arises, and we have something to talk about. So, and that is because we have proficiency. Everybody can have proficiency about a topic, either extroverted or introverted. But when you have proficiency and you're introverted, there will be guys who will let you know about something that you haven't seen before. That's it.
Yeah, and you've got to speak up to get it to be known. So if the introvert doesn't take the initiative, you as the humane leader, as the referee, you have to draw that input, right? So in your case, yes, there was a break and a silence, and you know, as because you're a humane leader, you spoke up. I can tell you from individual team players' perspective, many times I see the introverts that do have brilliance and great ideas, but if you don't draw them into the conversation, they're content to go through the brainstorming, drink their cup of coffee, and walk out without ever saying a word.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they may be the smartest person in the room.
That's why we as humane leaders had to listen to everybody. And the ones who haven't talked, it could be either because they don't have something. But if we recognize an introvert guy or lady, which most of the time has something pretty good to say, okay, hey, in a good manner, not without pressure, but hey, Claudia, what's your idea on this? And they will bring something cool and great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool, man. So I think with this, we could end this podcast, and it brings new ideas that we could talk about in the future.
Absolutely. Always does. Good to see you, Roberto, and we'll talk to you next week.